Welcome back to part 2 of this tiny workshop table saw cabinet build. So I'm building this table saw cabinet for a tiny workshop and it's got quite a lot of requirements to fit in a small space. So the overall dimension is about 4 foot by 3 foot, so not a huge amount of space at all. And I've got 5 requirements. First of all, it needs to have a table saw in it. Check. Second of all, it needs to have a router table over there. Work in progress. We need to have storage underneath. We're going to have dust collection in the back. And we're going to have folding out feet support as well, both on the sides and on the back as well. So quite a few bits to look at. Today, we're looking at the storage, so let's get into it.
So if you've not seen part 1, this is a rough idea of what I'm going for. As you can see, we've got some storage underneath the table saw compartment, and as we move around the back, you can see we've got space for dust extraction, and then also around on the router table as well, we've got space for a couple of drawers, and then some bit storage which will slide out from the side. So I picked up a bunch of these drawer slides off of Amazon. You won't find the link in the description because they are not the best, so I'm not going to be sharing the link for that. So to make the drawers, I'm going to be using some 18mm plywood for the sides, and then using 12mm for the bottoms. Having not learnt my lesson from part 1, I got a few pieces broken down on the panel saw just to fit them in my car, but I still had some quite chunky pieces to deal with. First of all, I started making the sides. And can we just take a moment to appreciate how small of an offcut I had once I cut out all the sides. For once in my life, I actually measured twice, cut once, and it worked perfectly. With that said, I'm not going to lie, this one was a fluke. With the sides cut out, it's now back to some comically large plywood for such a small shop. This is going to be for the drawer bottoms. I've still not bought that track saw I was talking about last week, so here I am thinking about my life choices and working out how much I value my fingers. Am I going to try and cut this on the table saw, or I'm going to try this with a handsaw? After reflection, there's no way I'm doing this on a handsaw. Let's see what happens. All you Americans with your small shop tours, which are like double car garages, this is the reality of working in a small shop. I'm just jealous. Take no notice of me. But do subscribe. Quickly work out if I've got enough room to step backwards to push this thing into the blade before we set the blade height, and there's not much more to do. Time to give it a go. Deep breath. First of all, got to move the tripod out of the way because this is going to knock the camera over if I don't move it back a little bit. As you can see, we're going to pick the plywood up and hit it into the garage door. What I wouldn't give for a massive space like Bourbon Moth or John Malecki. This hasn't got to be a perfect line, I'm just trying to break it down at this stage into more manageable chunks to get proper accurate cuts. And I've not got enough space. Brilliant. Well, it's not that far, let's break out that handsaw for old time's sake and just get this done. See if I've got enough room to saw. This is awkward. It was at this point I realised that some smart ass is going to say in the comments, why didn't you just flip the board over and run it through the table saw the other way? This message is for you. Shut up. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm a craftsman. It's not stupid if it works. So we've cut out the drawer sides, we've cut out the drawer bottoms, now time to do the fronts and backs. Really quick work on this table saw with rack and pinion fence. Everything just perfectly straight, works first time, really happy with this purchase. I am 3 for 3 today, look at that for an offcut. Nailing it. I'm not sure if this is cold air or just pure sawdust coming out my lungs at this stage. Definitely should have done the dust extraction before I sorted out the storage. You've got to get the drawer sides and drawer fronts all lined up nicely for YouTube. So to make sure that I'm cutting down the fronts and backs to the right length, I'm going to get 2 drawer sides and 2 drawer slides and then measure them and then remove that from the total width of the carcass to get a perfect fit. So to cut the grooves for the drawer bottoms, what I'm going to do is just use the table saw method, no dado blade or anything like that. Just going to make multiple passes, nudging the fence ever so slightly between each pass, and then running every board through, and we're going to end up with loads of boards with a groove in there, perfect alignment. And you don't need to worry that we've got a reveal there that you can see on the back, because one's going to be on the very back hidden, and the other one is going to be behind a drawer front, so you're not going to see that. So I only actually want the groove on 3 sides, so on each side of the drawer, and then the front of the drawer. The back of the drawer is just going to sit directly on top of the drawer bottom and allow you to screw in. Hopefully that makes sense when you see it in a minute. So now I'm just going to rip down the drawer backs so they fit flush with the top of the drawer bottom and the top of the drawer. I'm going to see what happens when you use a fence and no push stick. I did know this was going to happen, that's why I'm being so careful and sticking it out of the way. Pew! Push stick in place this time, it's time to finish off the others. So to fit the drawer boxes together, I'm just going to use some glue and a few screws, just 2 screws in each corner, just to hold this thing together. This is pretty thick plywood, so screwing into it should be absolutely fine, it's not going to go anywhere. If you've been watching the channel for a little while, you'll notice that recently I built a massive Nicholson workbench where I spent ages leveling the top, getting it all perfect and level. That sat about 2 feet away from me, but I'm using the table saw as an assembly table. I'm in that kind of small space, awkward phase where you're tripping over yourself, making more mess, with a view for it to hopefully in the future be a functional, workable space, so you're just going to have to bear with me. And here you should hopefully be able to see what I was talking about with the back. By flushing up to the top, you're then going to have the back is going to sit flush with the top of the base when it's slid into that slot. The next morning it's time to cut those drawer bottoms. In this tiny space, I've lost about 3 tape measures in the last 3 days. I've not found them, so I'm using the meter rule. And I quickly remember if I lean forward I can't see anything without a hat, so let's find that hat. That's better. Still not found the tape measures, but in a situation like this I actually find that a solid meter rule is much easier, more accurate. Now it's time to see if I cut the slots properly. Not bad for a guy with no tape measure. These things are pretty overbuilt, so I'm not going to bother with any glue. I'm just going to put 3 screws into each drawer bottom, pin them into the back, and then that thing is not going anywhere. And here we have the first of 5 nice big solid storage boxes that are going to sit underneath my table saw. Think of how many tape measures I could lose in there. I'm now going to use some offcuts to set the height of the runners, just to make sure that they're consistent on both sides and we're getting a nice level installation. And as you can see, once the first set are in, and then I'm just going to do the same thing, install the second set and work my way up so we're consistent across all the drawer slides moving up. And like I said in the beginning, I'm not going to be putting any links for this because they weren't that great. I will put links for other things I've used which I do recommend, but these have not been great. I did break a couple. When you install a drawer, you've got to at some point to have a little bit of a nudge just to make sure that everything's connected, and I think I struggle with what's a nudge and what's breaking a drawer slide, so I did break a couple, so yeah, not the best. So once the runners are mounted to the cabinet, all I'm going to do is insert the drawer, move it out slightly on some runners, put the first set of screws in, move it out again, put the next set of screws in, and that way you're going to be consistent, keep the drawers nice and flat, and you're going to get the drawers where you need them to sit. Once you've got the first 2 in, you can then obviously pull the drawers out and then install the rest of the screws by hand at a more easy working height. As you can see, we've got the first set of drawers built up now, and we just need to add some faces to these drawers to make everything look nice and neat. So I started by trying to use some double-sided tape just to hold things in place so I could put some screws in. That clearly wasn't going to work for me, so I had to reassess and work out a better way of doing it. In the end, I decided to just take out the drawer that's above, put some shims underneath the face so it's not going to be scraping along the floor, just raise it up ever so slightly, and we can hold everything in place, put a couple of screws in the back, and then that face is fixed. And it works like a drawer, which is good. And now it's just time to work up the rest of the drawers and put in the same process, just get everything lined up. Now, some of you might get a little bit of a bee in your bonnet that the bottom one has vertical grain, the second one has horizontal grain. It's plywood, man, get over it. I'm using scraps that I've got left, and this is the pieces that I had. So I'm going to use the playing card trick just to sort out the shims. Now it's mid-November, the only ones I could find were Grinch playing cards, but I'm sure they work just as fine. Now I was trying to remember if there's a good number of cards that you should use, but I'd sat on the floor at this point, my phone's up on a tripod. I'm not getting up again. 5's probably about right, so we're going to go for 5. After fitting everything together, taking the 5 cards out. 5 cards is actually quite, it's a narrow gap that, but it works absolutely fine, so it looks really good, so I'm happy with that.
So the drawers are in, and that's it for this part of this build. The main lesson learned is sort your dust extraction before you start building drawers. I've made so much mess and so much sawdust over the past few days. Dust extraction is definitely the next priority. So I've ordered some parts, they're arriving in the next couple of days, so hopefully you'll see that in next week's video. A couple of differences that you'll notice from the build plans that I sort of displayed at the beginning of this video. First of all, I had a pull-out drawer down here. I've actually been using it just as like a cubby hole, somewhere where you can put things in, you can't put stuff on top, and it's actually been really handy. So I think I'm going to leave it like that for now. The other thing you'll notice as well is I did have a pull-out drawer over here, which is for like router bits and things like that. I've had a very poorly dog this week. It's took a lot of time, energy and money, so I've just not got around to it yet. So that will be coming, and you'll see that later on in the build series, I'm sure. So until then, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Cheers.